Tonight, a shutdown of all non-essential services for Victoria in the face of climbing coronavirus cases. Also tonight, benched for at least 2 months. The AFL calls time on the 2020 footy season.
To say that this is the most serious threat to our game in 100 years is an understatement.
The Premier calls an early start to the school holidays for Victorian students, with schools to close on Tuesday. And the government throws $66 billion towards trying to protect jobs.
We're a strong nation, we're a strong people. And in the months ahead, we're going to find out just how we are.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Sunday. I'm Tamara, Oudyn. Over the next 2 days, Victoria will move into a full shutdown of all non-essential activity to try to put the brakes on the spread of the coronavirus. This extraordinary development will mean all schools will close from Tuesday. The shutdown will not affect supermarkets, pharmacies, banks, petrol stations and convenience stores. They and other essential services will stay open. Late this afternoon, the AFL announced the playing season has been suspended until at least the end of May, and the AFLW season is now over, ending with no premiership awarded. At the end of this, frankly, momentous day, this is where we stand in terms of infections. 67 Victorians have tested positive over the past 24 hours, taking the state's total number of cases to 296. The majority of them are in metropolitan Melbourne, but a number of regional centres are now recording some cases. 6 people are in hospital and 70 have recovered. Our reporter Elias Kluwer joins me now from Spring Street for more. So Elias, what does this mean for the daily life of Victorians? How are we going to be affected by this?
Yeah, good evening, Tam. Well, Victorians will still be able to go outside and access some essential services. You'll be able to shop for food, fill up your car, cash a cheque and buy medicine. Freight transport and home delivery services will still be operational, but some of the finer details of these unprecedented measures are yet to be fully explained. We still don't know what will happen to services like public transport and other businesses. Now, the Premier, Daniel Andrews, says he'll have more to say about that after a National Cabinet meeting this evening. And with school closing, we don't know how that will affect the workforce because, frankly, in modern history, nothing like this has ever been done.
What are you doing? I'm scared.
It's uncharted territory for Victorian kids.
Yeah, it's going to be a change from the usual routine that we have.
Junior team sport has already been banned, but from Tuesday, thousands of students won't have a school to go back to.
And I don't know how I'll go with it. I've never done it before, obviously.
While many kids are excited about the prospect of more time at home, there are concerns for the children that aren't.
We're mindful that for many students, school is a very, very safe place for them. Unfortunately, home sometimes is not a safe place. We see family violence issues escalate at times of crisis.
The crisis is hitting businesses hard. Bars and cafes on Chapel Street were open today, but from tomorrow they'll have to close its doors, along with other non-essential services. The lockdown is temporary, but stakeholders believe the damage could be permanent.
We want all Victorian businesses to do their best to keep afloat and, importantly, to keep their employees going, because we need you there so that you can bounce back when all this is over.
We need landlords to be given the tools they need to suspend commercial rents, because without trade, our businesses cannot survive.
Along with school closures and business lockdowns, Victorians have been advised against all non-essential travel, both interstate and locally.
We have suffered probably more quickly and more deeply than most other industries because our core avenues for developing business were, as I say, systematically shut down.
The travel industry is collapsing as the state heads into the unknown. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Melbourne.
And new travel restrictions announced today have prompted the AFL to suspend its men's season until the end of May and call an end to this year's AFLW competition. The future of the A-League season is still under a cloud, but Rugby League says it will play on. Peter Lusted reports.
Australian sport was turned on its head today.
The AFL has moved to immediately suspend the 2020 Toyota AFL Premiership season.
With non-essential travel cancelled and borders closing in South Australia and Western Australia, the season was slipping away. News started to filter in during games.
So let's enjoy it while we've got it.
Then it was official. The AFL postponed until at least April, while the AFLW season declared over with no premiership winner.
To say that this is the most serious threat to our game in 100 years is an understatement.
The tightened restrictions also spell trouble for football. The FFA says it is assessing the ongoing operations of the A-League. Rugby league fans didn't exactly heed the health warnings today. The NRL is hoping the non-essential travel recommendation won't apply to its competition.
We're using chartered flights. We're not using the normal commercial domestic planes. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to travel.
They'll learn more after this evening's National Cabinet meeting.
And I'm gathering what happens there is going to be the decider whether the NRL goes forward and plays any games.
It may be the last game standing. Peter Lusted, ABC News.
Australia is essentially on a war footing as the pandemic impacts every facet of life. Today, the Prime Minister asked Australians to cancel all non-essential domestic travel, and he announced a second economic stimulus package worth $66 billion, which includes increased job seeker and welfare payments, payouts to small and medium businesses, and early access to superannuation for people in financial stress. But it was all overshadowed with the news that some premiers were moving to put their states into lockdown. The exact details of shutdowns here in Victoria and across the country are being discussed tonight in a meeting between the Prime Minister and the premiers. From Canberra, here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Facing a crisis that defies comprehension, Scott Morrison has become a wartime Prime Minister.
We cannot prevent all the many hardships, all the many sacrifices that we will face in the months ahead.
Every Australian is to be conscripted to the fight, young, old, fit and infirm.
It is very serious. It is deadly serious. And that's why I would appeal to them, that they all have a role to play. People cannot be cavalier about these things.
Some people appear incapable or unwilling to heed the pleas or listen to the advice about social distancing. The Prime Minister warning it'll be forced on them.
State premiers and chief ministers may have to take far more draconian measures to enforce social distancing, particularly in areas of outbreaks.
And that's coming very soon. New South Wales and Victoria announcing a comprehensive shutdown of non-essential services. Over the next 48 hours, pubs, clubs, restaurants and some workplaces will be closed. Victoria will close schools from Tuesday. Other states and territories are expected to follow. So a lockdown looms, one that'll go for months.
There is no 2-week quick fix. There is no 4-week shutdown and it all goes away.
Exempt from shutdowns will be supermarkets, banks, pharmacies and petrol stations. Freight and home delivery will also continue. WA will turn some hotels into places of forced isolation for uncooperative coronavirus victims, while popular Rottnest Island will become a place for quarantine.
Western Australia is now in a war. The type of war we have never seen before.
Some states and territories are already closing borders amid strong advice to abandon non-essential travel.
It does mean those holidays that you might have been planning to take interstate over the school holidays, cancel them.
Some of these arrangements will be formalised during a hookup of state and federal leaders tonight. With Australia now on a war footing against an invisible enemy, consistency across jurisdictions is going to be important. New South Wales and Victoria know this and have forced the hand of National Cabinet. So expect schools and non-essential services across Australia to close this week. The country's resilience will be tested.
Together, Australia, we will get through this and we will emerge stronger. Thank you.
The nation hopes he's right. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The government is supercharging its safety net, boosting the unemployment benefit and giving some Australians early access to their super to help cushion the blow caused by COVID-19. Businesses will also be given cash to keep staff employed as part of the stimulus package. Jane Norman reports from Canberra.
Framed as a safety net package, this second round of spending is less about stimulus and more about putting the economy on life support. An extra $66 billion to be spent propping up businesses while helping the many thousands of Australians who will lose their jobs.
It's focusing on those who are going to feel the first blows.
Those already on or soon to be on income support will get a massive boost, $550 a fortnight on top of the renamed New Start allowance. It's a temporary fix for anyone who finds themselves out of work, including sole traders and casuals.
This means anyone eligible for the maximum job seeker payment will now receive more than $1,100 a fortnight, effectively doubling the job seeker allowance.
Concession card holders and those receiving other assistance, including family tax benefits, the age pension and disability support pension, will be eligible for a $750 cash payment. That's on top of the handout announced in the first stimulus package, helping
in total 5.2 million Australians.
The most contentious measure, allowing those in financial stress to tap into their nest egg now. The government's giving eligible Australians early access to their superannuation, $10,000 this financial year and another $10,000 the next, all tax-free.
This is the people's money, and this is the time they need it most.
Billions will flow for businesses too. Small and medium businesses and charities with a turnover of up to $50 million will have access to cash payments of up to $100,000 to retain staff during the crisis. The government's also going part guarantor for unsecured loans of up to $250,000.
Labor has taken an approach to these issues that we will be constructive. We will be supportive of these measures.
That means this package and the one announced just 10 days ago will be legislated when Parliament resumes tomorrow. Combined with the Reserve Bank's intervention, it brings the total spend to $189 billion, a staggering figure that's likely to be a down payment on what's to come.
The government's latest stimulus measures should provide some relief for society's most vulnerable. But the not-for-profit sector says much more is needed and they're calling for a specific help package for their industry. Amelia Terzon reports.
This charity would usually be taking truckloads full of free food for 12,000 needy people. But panic buying has cut off its supply.
We rely on food from local supermarkets to supply us with over 55% of our food, and we're probably down 85% on that.
Local growers are stepping in, but the situation is still dire.
We have some money to spend on food, but we can't source it.
This is happening as demand for services like this is set to skyrocket. In Melbourne, one charity is still getting its hands on food to cook for the needy. But it has had to cancel sit-down lunches due to social distancing measures, leaving at-risk people with one less social outlet.
Yeah, cheers. That's going to become harder and harder, and people are going to become more and more isolated. And when that happens, then it's going to really hit people, I think.
Foodbank is scrambling to pack up hampers for vulnerable people who need to self-isolate.
Lovely.
And this charity for needy mums is determined to stay open, even though fundraising efforts are drying up.
We had to cancel our two big events, our two major fundraisers that we stage in May each year, and that's lost revenue of more than $200,000.
The latest stimulus package is giving not-for-profits one-off payments of $100,000, and increases in welfare should ease demand on charities. But the Community Council of Australia says the sector is still in desperate times.
For many charities, literally a lockdown will mean that they can't do the work that they need to do, and they'll have to lay people off.
A call for help from those who help so many. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
A couple who got sick after being on board the Ruby Princess cruise ship say it should never have been allowed to sail. It's been revealed the same ship had just returned from a cruise during which 158 people reported feeling sick. 18 confirmed cases of COVID-19 have now been linked to the Ruby Princess. Martin and Leslie Kerr were told by staff no one had been sick on board the previous cruise, and when they disembarked, they travelled home to Melbourne by train and plane, where Leslie later tested positive. Martin's results are pending.
Getting off the ship has been a huge bonus to us. Should we have been allowed? I don't think so, until they got a couple of results back, and if they were positive, then no, we should still be on the ship. But I'm glad I'm home.
Crew of the Ruby Princess are quarantined on board the ship, which is floating off the coast of Wollongong. With so many Australians working from home in a bid to slow the spread of the virus, experts are warning it's not the only virus we should be watching out for. There's been a surge in online scams and viruses as the world's cyber criminals move to cash in on the crisis. The National Cyber Spy Agency is warning Australians and their businesses are at risk. It's urging people to pay more attention to cybersecurity.
Coronavirus is disrupting society in profound ways, and cyber criminals are positioned to benefit.
People stressed, doing things quickly in a panic mode, that's a great time for a cyber criminal to come in and you're just not concentrating and you click on the wrong link and whammo, everything can be gone.
Hackers are using COVID-themed emails and text messages to steal things like private information and banking details. This text message, purporting to be from the government, is just one of those doing the rounds.
I think there is an uptick. I'd be suggesting right now people be cyber alert but not cyber alarmed.
Australia's Cyber Spy Agency wants people to stay ahead of the scammers, with one industry in particular told to watch out.
Obviously, we need to make sure that people in the health sector are paying really good attention to their cybersecurity because they are of increasing criticality across society.
All industries are vulnerable, but you just know that people are going to target the area where people are going the most. So you can imagine health, banking, people looking at their superannuation funds.
Just like good hand hygiene, good cyber hygiene can keep a virus at bay.
Time when we know there could be increased opportunism from bad actors, organisations are all being encouraged to just ensure that basic hygiene's in place. Patch your servers, make sure that you're paying attention to the advice we put out on cyber.gov.au.
While money scams are the biggest risk for small business and people working from home, larger organisations are bracing for acts of cyber espionage. Cybersecurity firms around the world are reporting instances of state-sponsored hacking, some targeting officials with booby-trapped documents pretending to be about coronavirus. The global thirst for information is also the perfect petri dish for disinformation campaigns. Experts are warning people not to swallow social media content without question. The advice to avoid infection is simple. Wash your hands and think before you click. Siobhan Henu, ABC News.
And later this hour, a special program presented by Insiders host David Spears.
After the news tonight, I'll be interviewing the Prime Minister about the planned shutdowns and how the government's managing these extreme challenges. How will this new $66 billion rescue package work? As well as speaking to Scott Morrison, we'll talk to the sectors hardest hit by this unprecedented crisis.
The death toll is still rising dramatically in Italy, and the government there has introduced even tougher measures for a country that was already shut down. In the worst-hit region of Lombardy, all sport and physical activity has been banned outside, even if you're on your own. Italy has the world's highest death toll. Another 800 people died there on Saturday. The number of infections in Spain has jumped by 30%, and that country's Prime Minister says the worst is yet to come. Germany now has around 3,000 new cases every day. Bars and clubs are no longer allowed to open, and restaurants must close at 6 p.m. In Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned coronavirus will overwhelm the NHS unless everyone starts to practice social distancing and the vulnerable stay at home. He estimates the UK is 3 weeks behind Italy in terms of the pandemic, with more than 230 deaths. The United States is ramping up production of protective gear as the number of cases there keeps climbing. With more than 26,000 confirmed cases to date, healthcare workers are struggling with dwindling supplies. New York City is one of the hardest hit places. It'll be setting up field hospitals to treat the sick. North America correspondent James Glenday reports.
In emergency rooms across America, doctors are now preparing for the worst.
There's absolutely fear in the unknown, and as we see these numbers grow, it's very anxiety-inducing.
Due to a critical shortage of protective equipment, they're having to improvise to shield themselves from an unseen enemy.
My mask snapped while I was trying to take it off in between patients, and I had to staple it back.
Hey, your surgery's in OR4.
The actors from TV series Grey's Anatomy have donated their medical props to hospitals struggling with supplies.
You rock. We love you. Stay safe.
Some distilleries are shifting gears to produce hand sanitizer.
We normally use this still for gin production.
And several governors have been scouring the globe for extra gowns, gloves, masks and ventilators.
We're working on every level. Every piston is firing. Everything that can be done is being done.
But it could be some time before supply meets demand, so health officials in the hardest hit areas are trying to conserve what they can, urging Americans with mild cases to manage their symptoms alone.
Not every single person in the United States needs to get tested.
The Vice President is one exception to that rule. He was tested after a staff member fell ill. But for everyone else, social distancing is deemed the best measure. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans has now been told to stay home.
Because we all are potential transmitters of this virus, and we all, to some varying degree, are potential victims of this virus.
In Miami, hotels are being closed to ensure spring break partygoers get off the beaches. In California, one drive-through cinema has seen a spike in popularity, and in Maryland, drive-through confession was offered to worshippers.
Here in Washington, the president's been repeatedly quizzed about why he didn't move sooner to try to stem this outbreak, and reacted angrily when it was suggested he'd badly mishandled things.
Donald Trump claims reporters should instead be focused on his economic stimulus package.
It's so insulting when they write phony stories that they know are fake news.
His long-promised spending bill is still tied up in negotiations, though could pass on Monday. For many businesses who are already laying off staff, it can't come soon enough. James Glenday, ABC News, Washington.
Well, life in some parts of China is returning to normal, but there's been a slight rebound in COVID-19 cases. The government claims it's almost managed to stop the spread of coronavirus, but with thousands of Chinese returning home from overseas, new infections are on the rise.
While many countries have closed their borders, China's kept them open. But flying into the country is now an ordeal. Hours of temperature checks and paperwork before being bussed to quarantine hotels to spend 2 weeks locked in. In the city where the global pandemic started, there are signs of hope. Chinese figures are hard to verify, but the government claims there hasn't been a single new infection in Wuhan for 4 days. If that's true, the drop-off in new cases across China is a remarkable sign that strict measures do work. From a peak in February, the government claimed it had got down to just a handful of new cases last week. But now it's rising again, with dozens of incoming passengers each day bringing the virus with them. Here in Beijing, you get your temperature taken everywhere, but the streets are really bouncing back to life. Bars, cafes and shops are now all open. And the government has even dropped an order to wear face masks outside.
We went through the panic when the outbreak started, but we're slowly getting back to normal.
I'm still wearing a mask because even though things are better here, the outbreak is severe overseas.
Had China been able to contain the original outbreak earlier, its strategy to quash the virus completely may have worked. But with so many infections among citizens returning from abroad, it will need to keep up its border vigilance for a very long time. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Beijing.
Let's move away from the coronavirus now. Unfortunately, it's not great news, but here we go. It's predicted that by the end of the century, global sea levels will have risen by as much as a metre, and the impact on Australia will be immense. With 85% of the population living on or near the coast, many communities are starting to plan for frequent flooding, severe coastal erosion, loss of beaches and higher storm surges. Daya Clark reports.
7 months after moving in, Rolly Green is already clearing out the shed in the backyard of his home on the northern Gold Coast.
And the water is coming down the street, and then the drains aren't quite good enough, so then it pools around here, then comes into the yard.
The Jacobs Well property was one of many across the Gold Coast which flooded when record rainfall drenched the region in February. Fortunately, the rain didn't coincide with a king tide, which would have pushed water levels higher as drains backed up.
The only reason I bought this place is because it's about a metre off the ground.
But climate scientists are concerned a metre may not be enough to protect Rolly Green's house in the future. In its most conservative scenario, the International Panel on Climate Change says global sea levels will rise by as much as 60 centimetres by the end of the century. The predictions are worse if global temperatures rise beyond 2 degrees.
Broadly, what we're kind of planning towards is something in that 80 centimetre to 1 metre range.
Mapping company NGIS Australia modelled the impact on coastal communities by using the current highest tide and then adding 74 centimetres of sea level rise. The mapping shows one of Australia's premier tourist destinations, the Gold Coast, would be hard hit.
So the beach will respond to that by eroding back towards dunes if they're available, but if they're not, it will go into homes, infrastructure, roads.
Dubbed the last line of defence, a boulder wall concealed behind sand dunes stretches along most of the developed shoreline. Kate Madison owns a popular cafe at Surfers Paradise near Budds Beach, a sandy retreat on the Nerang River. It's a low-lying area, and on a king tide, water rises through the drains. Add 80 centimetres of sea level rise and it becomes more than a mere inconvenience.
Just looking around here, there's not one property that wouldn't be devastated.
More than 500,000 people call the Gold Coast home, and that figure is forecast to grow by another 350,000 in the next 20 years. Development sites are at a premium, some on floodplains.
Where myself and a lot of other lawyers see the litigation risk being in the future is against local governments for approving developments in hazard areas.
The Gold Coast City Council told the ABC no one was available for interview, but in a statement pointed to a number of measures it's already undertaken, including the installation of an artificial reef off Palm Beach.
We have to start to think now strategically. And that costs a little bit money.
Scientists say it's a tomorrow problem that must be tackled today. Daya Clark, ABC News, Gold Coast.
Former insiders at Victoria's energy safety watchdog say the regulator isn't tough enough on the state's electrical networks, and that's putting regional Victorians at risk. There are more than 150,000 power poles across Victoria that are more than 50 years old. And every year, power line faults are starting hundreds of fires. Here's Consumer Affairs reporter Liz Hobday.
In southwest Victoria, dairy farmer Simon Craven is still dealing with the effects of the St Patrick's Day fires 2 years ago.
I think a lot of us will never be the same. Every week you find another thing that was affected on the farm.
22 houses were destroyed in the fires. The CFA saved Simon's house, but large parts of his farm were burnt.
It's hard to look at.
The blaze started when a branch from this hollow tree fell onto a high voltage power line. By the time the Poles and Wires company Powercor notified the regulator and Energy Safe Victoria sent inspectors to examine the scene, a month had passed. Important evidence had been destroyed.
I just cannot believe that even happened. A tree was able to be cut up into a heap of pieces without anyone looking at it.
In a statement to the ABC, Powercor says the tree was more than 10 metres from the power lines, well outside the 3-metre clearance zone. Energy Safe Victoria ruled the tree was at a safe distance. But Simon Craven says the investigation was botched.
I don't think they're doing their job. And I think if they did do our job, we wouldn't have this fire.
Multiple inquiries found each of the 6 fires that night was sparked by power lines. Energy Safe Victoria says it's prosecuting Powercor over 2 of those fires. It's also told Powercor to change its regime for power line inspection and replacement. In the deadliest fires in Australian history, on Black Saturday, 161 of the 173 people who died were killed in fires sparked by power line faults. The Royal Commission found Energy Safe Victoria lacked influence over the power line companies. Andrew Last was the executive in charge of power line safety at Energy Safe Victoria until late 2016.
Energy Safe Victoria hasn't changed in a decade. So the things that were bad 10 years ago and produced the conditions that might cause another Black Saturday or St Patrick's Day fire are still existent now.
He says he tried to implement a tougher approach, but says the regulator was too close to the network companies it's supposed to keep an eye on.
I don't think that they are a truly independent regulator.
Andrew Last believes that culture hasn't changed and it's putting Victorians at risk.
Regional Victoria is not being protected in the way it should be.
Andrew Last is just one of several former Energy Safe Victoria executives the ABC has spoken to, who say despite some changes, the regulator still isn't adequately policing the state's energy networks. But Energy Safe Victoria insists it is independent and says since 2009 it has more than tripled the resources dedicated to policing the energy networks. Monash University Professor Graham Hodge gave expert evidence at the Royal Commission on Energy Safe Victoria.
It's extraordinarily difficult to tell whether they're in the hands of those that it should be regulating, whether it's partnering them or, in fact, whether it's regulating them and governing them, which is kind of what we expect of a strong regulator.
After reviewing its recent reporting on bushfire safety, Professor Hodge says there are still big gaps.
I do want to know whether they're working effectively in my name as a citizen, and I don't really get that sense at the moment.
The Victorian Government says it's appointing a 3-person Board of Commission at Energy Safe Victoria to build a stronger and more accountable regulator. One of those new appointments will start in the coming weeks. Liz Hobday, ABC News.
To sport now. And on the last day of the AFL for at least 2 months, North Melbourne staged a second-half fight back to record a thrilling win over St Kilda. The Kangaroos defeated the Saints by 2 points and Hawthorn beat the Brisbane Lions by 28 points.
St Kilda started strongly with debutant Max King making an early impression.
Wearing Nick Riewoldt number 12, from the old King to the new King, kicks his first goal in AFL footy.
The Saints ruled in most departments and led by 29 points at half-time.
So he's got a fair bit on it. It's sailing. It's sailed all the way home.
But it wasn't smooth sailing for St Kilda in the third term as North Melbourne made its move. By three-quarter time, the Kangaroos were within striking distance.
Larky bangs it long. It's bending. It's bending.
North hit the front for the first time with 9 minutes to go.
And they're like an unstoppable train right now.
The Kangaroos held on to win by 2 points.
But it could be the last day of footy we get for a while. We've got a classic.
Hawthorn and Brisbane started their game with speculation swirling that it would be their last hit-out for months.
Shot lines get their second.
The Hawks found open space and ran away to a 9-point lead at the long break.
And he will cruise in. The easiest goal we could ever possibly imagine.
There may not have been a crowd or a next week, but Hawthorn coach Alastair Clarkson was maintaining the intensity. Hawthorn steadied through the persistence of Sean Burgoyne.
And just did what he does better than anyone else. The Silks got 3.
Any remaining resistance from the Lions was shrugged off by the Hawks on their way to a 28-point win, and even the hardest markers couldn't help smiling. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
Last night, Greater Western Sydney managed an impressive 32-point win over Geelong. The Giants' silky finishing proved the difference with 17 goals and 3 behinds. Harry Perryman kicked 4 goals as Geelong conceded 100 points for the first time in 34 games. And Port Adelaide easily accounted for the Suns with a 47-point win on the Gold Coast. The Power handed their opponents a 19th consecutive defeat, restricting them to just 4 goals. Well, in the lead up to today's announcement that the season has been cancelled, Carlton defeated the Brisbane Lions by 29 points in the AFLW semi-finals. The Blues trailed early before taking the lead in the second term. Strong defence restricted Brisbane's scoring opportunities. The Lions were given some hope when Jesse Wardlaw converted a free kick in front before Carlton sealed the win.
Falcon, it spills to G, off to McAvoy. Flying shot at goal is good, and the Blues will get a late one.
Blues forward Taylor Harris was placed on report in the third term for a sling tackle. If you're a young Australian looking for work on a farm, knowing how to handle a canine or two is a big foot in the door. Some of the best handlers have been showcasing their skills at the National Championships in South Australia. Bridget Herman reports.
25-year-old Bree Cudmore is competing at the Australian Yard Dog Championships in Lucendale with her best mate and colleague.
So this is Marista Zoe. She's my first ever dog. She's a sensational little dog. She's done extremely well for me in the trials and got me where I am today.
She's one of many young people at the event, with nearly half the competitors aged 25 or under. This is a skill set that's thriving.
Owners of properties see the value of the dogs and what they can do, and if a young person has got a good young team of dogs, they'll get a job quicker than someone who hasn't got a dog at all.
23-year-old Josh Megson's 4 working Kelpies have helped him find work.
It gives me the options of not having to have as many people in the yards or being able to go out into a paddock by yourself and bring in a mob by yourself.
So, who's training who?
I've been told by some more experienced people that certain dogs of mine actually know stock better than I do at this stage, and it's 100% true.
These dogs are working professionals and they don't come cheap. An untrained pup can cost $700, but the best of the best can cost tens of thousands of dollars, making them a major investment for young people looking to get ahead.
It's like, working with your best friend, really, for me. These are my best friends. And they still love me at the end of the day, even if I've worked them all day.
Teaching young farmers new tricks. Bridget Herman, ABC News, Lucendale.
To the weather now. And it was fairly dry overnight. The coolest spot was Mount Hotham, where it got down to 4 degrees. Today, isolated showers were sprinkled across the south. Mount Baw recorded 6.2 millimetres. Temperature-wise, it was mild. It hit 24 in several centres, including Mildura, Swan Hill, Walpyup and Yarrawonga. In Melbourne, we reached our high of 18.3 degrees just before 4 o'clock this afternoon. It hasn't moved much. Outside now it's 17. Interstate today, it was mostly sunny in Sydney, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane and Hobart, and storms cleared in Darwin. The satellite picture is showing a middle to high level cloud band stretching from southern WA to southern South Australia, and some low to middle level cloud over Victoria and Tassie. There's a large high pressure system south of the Bight, and that'll reach our south tomorrow and Tuesday, while a trough will move into the state from New South Wales on Wednesday. There'll be showers and storms in parts of Queensland tomorrow, some late showers for the top end and the south of WA, showers for the west of South Australia and northeastern New South Wales, and showers should clear from southwest Tasmania. The capital city forecast has Sydney and Brisbane expecting a shower or two. It'll be cloudy in Hobart, partly cloudy in Adelaide. A sunny days ahead for Perth, and there'll be storms in Darwin. Back home, it'll be a cool and partly cloudy day across the south, with some isolated light showers and drizzle in the morning. In the north, it'll be dry, mild and mostly sunny with light to moderate south to southeasterly winds. On the bays, 15 to 20 knot southerlies will ease to 10 to 15 knots during the day, waves to a metre. Monday in Melbourne will be partly cloudy with the chance of light showers in the morning and early afternoon and a top of 18. down to 12 tonight. And looking ahead, Tuesday and Wednesday, partly cloudy and 18. Thursday, partly cloudy and 20. And then it warms up a little at the end of the week. Friday will be partly cloudy and 24. Saturday and Sunday, 28. Before we go, let's just recap the main points on a significant day for Victoria. The state will shut down all non-essential activity to slow down the spread of the coronavirus. All schools will close from Tuesday, but the shutdown will not affect essential services, including supermarkets, pharmacies, banks, petrol stations and convenience stores. They, among others, will stay open. And the AFL has suspended the season until at least the end of May, and the AFLW season is now done. For all the very latest, whenever you want it, head to abc.net.au/coronavirus or check the ABC News channel. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Now here's David Spears with a special program on the coronavirus. He'll be joined by the PM and we'll have full analysis of what the shutdowns will mean for all of us. Good night.